I'm Tamala, and this is another episode of Trailblazers.
Hi, my name is Lori Gabriel. We're going to be talking today about Sacheen LittleFeather. Marie Louise Cruz was born on November 14th, 1946, and passed away on October 2nd, 2022. She was better known as Sacheen LittleFeather. She identified as an American actress and activist for Native American civil rights. Early life. LittleFeather's mother, Geraldine Marie Cruz, was a leather stamper. A leather stamper is someone who uses stamps to create an imprint onto a leather surface. The craft person usually uses a mallet. Geraldine was of French, German, and Dutch descent and was born and raised in California. LittleFeather's father was Manuel Ybarra Cruz, a saddle maker. He was of Mexican descent. Mr. Cruz was also born and raised in California. LittleFeather attended North Salinas High School from 1960 to 1964 and was active in 4-H Club. She won awards in home economics categories such as food, preservation, and fashion. After graduating high school, she attended Hartnell Junior College and studied elementary education. At the age of 19, she spent a year in a psychiatric hospital. She had heard voices that pushed her to a suicide attempt. In a 3-hour visual history interview in 2022, LittleFeather stated, "The institution was a hellhole, and doctors used what she said was psychodrama. She had to role-play her parents." She goes on to state that this happened while black hooded figures listened in a dim-lit room to help her reconstruct memories of childhood abuse and abandonment. LittleFeather reported that she was diagnosed with schizophrenia. In 1969, she moved to the San Francisco Bay Area to pursue a modeling career. She carried a portfolio of photos taken by Kenneth Cook of Cook's Photography. During this time, LittleFeather began treatment for her schizophrenia. She said she was given Thorazine and other medications, but was mostly stabilized with much help from the San Francisco Bay Area Native American community. While she attended California State College at Hayward, which is now California State University in the East Bay, she studied dramatics and speech. During college, Sacheen continued to cultivate a Native American identity. Name change. Her first name became Sacheen because that was the name her father called her before he died. Sacheen states that I danced in front of my father and always wore a feather in my hair, and that's when my father called me LittleFeather. As time went on, Sacheen learned more about Native American customs from elders and other protesters, like Adam Fortunate Eagle, then known as Adam Nordwell.
Accounts of abusive childhood. In interviews, LittleFeather has said that she had a difficult childhood. Her mother left her father when she was 4. She was taken to live with her maternal grandparents along with her 2 younger sisters. Her parents lived next door. She has stated her mother and 2 sisters were subject to their father's rage and beatings. In an opinion piece following her death, Navajo writer and activist Jacqueline Keeler wrote that Littlefinger's sisters disputed that their father had been abusive. They claimed that LittleFeather's account seemed to have been taken from that of how her father was raised. He had grown up in poverty and his own father was abusive. LittleFeather had only 7 film credits to her name. 2 of them were unnamed characters. She has stated, "I got a few jobs with Italian film crews because in those days I was considered exotic, and that meant that you didn't get employment very often." She goes on to state, "There was job discrimination, and the movie industry basically looked like a Clorox factory. It was so white, it was ridiculous." In 1975, Sacheen reported that she was working on a movie script about Edward S. Curtis with Cap Weinberger Jr. Weinberger had written an article about Curtis for the Smithsonian Magazine. Mr. Curtis photographed a multitude of Native Americans. His goal was to document Native American life pre-colonization. J.P. Morgan gave him $75,000 to photograph a series of indigenous people in 1906. He was well compensated for his photographs. As a side note, LittleFeather was credited with co-founding the American Indian Registry for Performing Arts. Playboy magazine planned a spread called 10 Little Indians in 1972. One of the models was LittleFeather, but the spread ended up being canceled. In October 1973, they ran the photographs of Sacheen as a standalone feature, due to the fame she received at the Oscars. She was personally criticized for what was seen as exploitation of her fame. LittleFeather explained that it was strictly a business agreement to earn the money needed to attend the World Theater Festival in Nancy, France. Later, LittleFeather stated, "I was young and dumb."
Alcatraz. In 1969, dozens of indigenous activists occupied Alcatraz Island. They were led by the American Indian movement. The prison was closed, so the property was being sold. The protesters wished for it to be returned to the Sioux tribe. It was to be turned into an Indian school, cultural center, and museum. The protesters were publicly offering the federal government the exact same amount for the land that the government first offered them. LittleFeather was a student at the time and was unable to dedicate herself fully to the cause. She has stated, "I only got to go on Alcatraz as a weekend warrior, so to speak." She goes on to say, "Those weekends on the island, however, were affirming. She hadn't grown up in her indigenous community. LittleFeather didn't know much about her culture. According to an article published after LittleFeather's death, activist Lenata Warjack, who was at Alcatraz, reports that LittleFeather was not there." Politics. As a spokesperson for the National American Indian Council, LittleFeather protested President Richard Nixon's budget cuts to federal Indian programs. On March 6, 1973, Sacheen participated in a meeting between the Federal Communications Commission and members of several minority groups about the representation of minorities on television. The president gave Native protesters space to air grievances. It is reported that Nixon was the first president to give land back to Native Americans. In 1970, he signed a bill that returned the sacred Blue Lake in New Mexico to the Taos Pueblo community. He continued to support Native people's education and self-rule. Lead up to the 1973 Academy Awards speech. Accounts of how Sacheen first met Marlon Brando vary. In one of the first interviews, after the Oscar speech, she mentioned that she met Mr. Brando through his interest in the Indian movement. Francis Ford Coppola reportedly observed LittleFeather on a TV monitor backstage and introduced her to Marlon Brando. Another account of how they met comes from a 1974 interview that stated LittleFeather was working for a San Francisco radio station when she applied for work with Coppola. The article quotes Coppola as stating, "The reason he introduced her to Marlon Brando is as follows. Knowing Brando's interest in the Indian." At the time of the 1973 Oscars, Sacheen had known Brando for nearly a year. A later account describes Coppola as LittleFeather's neighbor in San Francisco. So very different accounts of what's going on here.
How Sacheen LittleFeather ended up at the 1973 Oscars. Mr. Brando was nominated for his performance of Vito Corleone in The Godfather. He was up for Best Actor award. Before the ceremony began, Brando decided that he would boycott the Oscars. He made this decision in part because of the Wounded Knee protest. The American Indian movement was against the ongoing siege of their people. Brando also was boycotting due to his views on how Native Americans were represented in American films. He called Sacheen and asked her to appear on his behalf. LittleFeather is quoted as saying, "I was a spokesperson, so to speak, for the stereotype of Native Americans in film and television." Award ceremony. Sacheen joined the audience minutes before the award for Best Actor was announced. She was with Brando's secretary, Alice Malchik. She wore her hair tied with native-style beadwork, moccasins, and a fringed and beaded buckskin dress. She held in her arms a 739-word speech that was written by Brando. Producer Howard W. Koch reportedly told her, "You can't read all that," so she got it all down to 60 seconds. LittleFeather's account is that Koch told her that she had 60 seconds to deliver the speech or else she would be removed from the stage and arrested. Howard Koch stated that he permitted her to stay and make her speech after she promised not to make a scene. Brando was declared the winner for Best Actor. LittleFeather walked onto the stage and raised her hand to decline the Oscar trophy. This is what she said on stage. "Hello, my name is Sacheen LittleFeather. I'm Apache, and I am president of the National Native American Affirmation Image Committee. I'm representing Marlon Brando this evening, and he has asked me to tell you in a very long speech which I cannot share with you presently because of time, but I will be glad to share with the press afterwards, that he very regretfully cannot accept this very generous award, and the reasons for this being are the treatment of American Indians today by the film industry, booing and applause, and on television, in movie reruns, and also with recent happenings at Wounded Knee. I beg at this time that I have not intruded upon this evening, and that we will in the future, our hearts and our understandings will meet with love and generosity. Thank you on behalf of Marlon Brando." She was escorted off stage and past several people who were critical of her. She found herself in front of the press. Sacheen has said of the experience, "I spoke from my heart because the heart and the heartbeat is the voice of all Indigenous people everywhere." Marty Pasetta both later recalled that John Wayne was waiting in the wings. He had to be restrained by 6 security guards to prevent him from forcing her off stage. This account has since been disputed by film historian Farhan Naheem and biographer Scott Eyman. It is reported that he probably just yelled at her. At a later press conference, Sacheen read to journalists the 739-word speech that Brando had prepared. The New York Times published the full text the next day.
Response from the Peanut Gallery. Later that Oscar night, before Raquel Welch announced the Best Actress winner, she had stated, "I hope the winner doesn't have a cause." When Clint Eastwood presented the Best Picture award, he joked, "I don't know if I should present this award on behalf of all the cowboys shot in all the John Ford westerns over the years." Esteemed actor Michael Caine, the night's co-host, criticized Brando for letting some poor little Indian girl take the booze, instead of standing up and doing it himself. LittleFeather stated in 2022 that some people mockingly used the tomahawk chop towards her as she was led out of the Oscars. Academy apology. The Academy eventually acknowledged the abuse LittleFeather experienced following her speech. They stated it was unwarranted and unjustified. The Academy goes on to state, "The emotional burden you have lived through and the cost to your own career in our industry are irreparable. For too long, the courage you showed has been unacknowledged." LittleFeather's response was, "I knew that if you speak the truth will last beyond the time of eternity. I was willing to do this because I knew that my ancestors would be behind me and before me and surrounding me." Later career awards and activism. LittleFeather was described as a founding member of the Red Earth Indian Theater Company in Seattle. She was awarded an honorary Eagle Spirit Award at the 2013 American Indian Film Festival that took place at the Red Earth Indian Theater Company. Modern accounts of the founding of the Red Earth Performing Arts Company by Nez Perce actor and playwright John Kaufman Jr. do not mention LittleFeather. LittleFeather was a secretary and community member at large on the interim board of directors of the American Indians AIDS Institute of San Francisco. Around the same time, LittleFeather worked at the Gift of Love AIDS Hospice in San Francisco. This was founded by Mother Teresa, whom LittleFeather trained under. Sacheen has stated, "I volunteered, and that's when I asked her, and she said yes, she would not turn down a helping hand. So I became a student of hers, if you will." LittleFeather has said of this experience, "We knew that our people were dying from AIDS, and that we were the only ones to take charge and to help our own people through the process of AIDS, and to help to go through the process of death to the other side." In 1990, it was reported that LittleFeather's brother had died of AIDS. Sacheen proclaimed, working on 2 shows for PBS, Remember Me Forever and The Americas Before Columbus. She is said to have participated in events related to a year-long celebration of the Americas before Columbus, but there is no record of a PBS show by either name being broadcast in 1992. In November of 2019, LittleFeather received the Brando Award, which recognizes individuals for their contributions to the American Indian. From the Red Nation International Film Festival, Sacheen was involved in events commemorating the 50th anniversary of the occupation of Alcatraz, including serving as head powwow judge.
Personal life. In 1973, Sacheen was married to engineer Michael Rubio. She was later in a 32-year-long relationship with and married Charles Cosharay Johnston. Sacheen studied orthomolecular nutrition and stated that she had wanted to see where all the white food came from. This led her to go live in Stockholm. LittleFeather stated that she wanted to travel in Europe to see where the white people came from, just as people are always going to reservations to see where the Indians come from. While traveling, she became interested in the foods of other diverse cultures and noted similarities between foods such as Spanish buñuelos and American Indian fry bread, as well as Russian pierogi and the meat pies made by her Kiowa friends. In 2018, Sacheen LittleFeather developed stage 4 breast cancer. It was a reoccurrence of breast cancer from which she was in remission for in 2012. She said in 2021 interview that the cancer had metastasized to her right lung. LittleFeather died in her home in California on October 2nd, 2022, at the age of 75. Image dispute. In 2015, LittleFeather proclaimed that her name and image were being used falsely to raise money claimed to be for the Lakota Nation. The money raised was never donated to any campaign.
Ancestry dispute. LittleFeather repeatedly proclaimed that her father had White Mountain Apache and Yaqui ancestry. However, her sisters, as well as researchers who have looked into the claim, confirmed that she was of Spanish-Mexican ancestry and with no known ancestors who had a tribal identity in Mexico. Her sisters reported that she had no connection to the Yaqui or White Mountain Apache tribes of Arizona. The sisters believe LittleFeather fabricated a Native identity because she thought it was more prestigious to be Native American than to be Hispanic. Some of LittleFeather's distant family may have been born in Pima Odin tribal territory in Sonora, Mexico. Scholars have stated that actual tribal members in these communities would have been a minority during that time. According to Liza Black, associate producer of history and Native American and Indigenous Studies at Indiana University, as well as a citizen of Cherokee Nation, LittleFeather was a troubled woman who made the stories of others her own. The Yakai tribe had reported that while neither LittleFeather nor her parents were enrolled tribal members, that does not mean that we could independently confirm that she is not of Yakai in ancestry, generally from Mexico or the southwestern United States. Roger Ebert, an American film critic, had disputed LittleFeather's Native American ethnicity in 2004 in an obituary for Marlon Brando. Mr. Ebert stated that after her attendance at the Oscars, she was identified as Maria Cruz, an actress who was not an Indian. Roger subsequently published a letter received from LittleFeather's lawyer, which asked him to clarify that LittleFeather was Native American, with a father who was Yakai and White Mountain Apache. The lawyer's letter proclaimed that Cruz was her married name. However, on Sacheen's official website, a response to Ebert's article contradicts the lawyer and states that she was born Maria Cruz. Because LittleFeather had been a well-known activist, these allegations caused mixed reactions. Academic and journalist Dina Gilo-Whitaker, who studies the United States, wrote that the truth about community leaders is crucial, even if it means losing a hero. She goes on to state that the work LittleFeather did is still valuable, but there's a need to be honest about the harm done by pretendians, especially by those who manage to fool so many people that they become iconic, as LittleFeather did. A pretendian is someone who projects themselves as having Native American ancestry or identifies as part of the Indigenous Canadian tribal nation, but the claim is false. It can be considered an extreme form of a cultural appropriation. There is a pattern that pretendians follow. It is reported by Dina Gilo-Whitaker that they exploit people's lack of knowledge about who American Indian people are by perpetuating ambiguity in a number of ways. Self-identification or even DNA tests, for instance, obscure the fact that American Indians have not only a cultural relationship to a specific tribe and the United States, but a legal one. Pretendians rarely can name any people they are related to in a native community or in their family tree. They also just blatantly lie. Pretendianism is particularly prevalent in entertainment, publishing, and academia. Harm is caused when resources and even jobs go to fakes instead of the people they were intended for. There have been calls for revisions or removal of the exhibition featuring a tribute to Sacheen LittleFeather at the Academy Museum of Motion Pictures, and questions raised about the Academy's commitment to historical accuracy. Historians and activists state that the allegations should prompt the Academy to investigate and determine whether it should amend its presentation of LittleFeather in its gallery spaces or in podcast and video interviews posted on its official channel. As the 50th anniversary of Sacheen LittleFeather's appearance at the Oscars neared, the Cruz sisters reiterated that LittleFeather had faked a Native American identity for all that time. In a February 2023 letter, LittleFeather's sister, Trudy Orlandi, asked the Academy to remove the tribute from its museum gallery. As of March 7, 2023, Orlandi had yet to receive a reply.
Rosalind Cruz and Trudy Orlandi. 2 days after the death of LittleFeather, Rosalind Cruz was angrily scrolling Twitter. She was furious at the outpouring of praise for LittleFeather. She stated, "I was reading what all these people were saying. Oh, rest in peace, and she was a saint, and she sacrificed herself." The sisters had been estranged for about 13 years for a variety of reasons. Rosalind Cruz said, but at that point she still believed her family had Indian ancestry. Then she saw tweets by the writer Jacqueline Keeler, who is a citizen of Navajo Nation. Keeler has has stirred controversy with her efforts to expose what she calls pretendians. Jacqueline Keeler was disputing LittleFeather's claims that her father was White Mountain Apache and Yukai. Cruz sent a Twitter message to Keeler, writing that her grandmother was of Yukai and Spanish descent. Cruz herself had tried to enroll in the White Mountain Apache tribe, but over the next few weeks, Cruz said Keeler showed her genealogical research that traced Cruz's father's family back to Mexico in 1850 and said there was no evidence of native ancestry. Rosalind and Trudy were both persuaded by the research. Less than a month after their sister's death at age 75, the San Francisco's Chronicle published a column by Keeler under the headline, Sacheen LittleFeather was a Native American icon. Her sisters say she was an ethnic fraud. The sisters were not informed of her passing nor invited to the funeral. Orlandi states, Sacheen did not like herself. She didn't like being Mexican. So yes, it was better for her that way to play someone else. Cruz added, she lived in a fantasy and she died in a fantasy. The column unleashed an intense response in Native American circles on social media. There were people who condemned LittleFeather, saying she had fabricated an identity to promote her Hollywood career. But other people strongly objected to Keeler's investigation, stating it ignored the complicated ways Native identity can be formed, particularly for those who do not meet the formal criteria for tribal membership. Enrollment typically requires proof of tribal ties, often described in terms of one's percentage of Indian blood or blood quantum. What many people don't understand, some natives aren't enrolled, states Laura Clark, a journalist who is
Muskogee?
and Cherokee. She goes on to report some natives are reconnecting with their tribes. Some natives don't have enough Indian blood to register because of blood quantum minimums, and some natives have had their tribes nearly erased to the point that organized citizenship records simply don't exist.
Okay. I did not realize that she was a pretendian and that she was actually Spanish Mexican and had no clear, what they say, blood relation to an Indian tribe. That was surprising. What was going on for her? I don't know. Like maybe it doesn't seem like she thought it was ultra cool to become like a pretend Indian and just take on that persona. I think it was more of like she wanted to help people and she really fully believed that she was a native. She was she went into the medical field. That was her passion. It wasn't to become a world famous actress. I mean, that's just something she did for fun. And when it didn't work out, she continued to help people in the medical field. She helped Mother Teresa. She helped people with AIDS. I think that was more of her interest. I think that she used the platform of like the Oscars to like really show that Native American people have been mistreated, and for that to for people to become aware of it. How she lived her life. There obviously was some issues that she was having that she was struggling with. She was diagnosed with schizophrenia. She tried to commit suicide when she was younger, and her brother died of AIDS. Those things are going to have an impact on your life, and I don't know if she got help for it or not, but I think that definitely played into her decision making. What are your thoughts on it?
I think it's a complicated thing because I didn't know about the controversy either. I have had some interesting perspectives on culture come into my awareness recently that make me kind of see this in an interesting way. And one was from a person descent, and they were talking about how they, by interacting with a native person, gained more awareness of being Mexican, and like how like the people from originally from Mexico were indigenous people, And it's like where we put the boundaries of things is kind of arbitrary, you
Mm.
know. Like there's some geographical stuff of where Mexico begins and like where Texas and like New Mexico are and like things like that, if you look historically. And I don't know if like, I mean, obviously there are different cultures, but there are a lot of people who are of Mexican descent that I think had their indigenous cultures kind of erased. And so I could see them wanting to connect with indigenous cultures that are in the country that they're living to try to kind of reconnect. And it seems like she did do a lot of research and like spent a lot of time doing stuff with Native people. And I I don't know what to say like about like whether it's right or wrong, but at least she was like trying to authentically gain awareness. I think that I definitely am not the person to be able to make judgment on whether or not it's right or not. But I do think that she did a lot of good works in her life, and she did struggle with mental health issues. I also think it's important to look at the fact that she had strained family relationships. I think there might be something to just accepting everything that her family says because sometimes people don't always, it's just, we don't know who's right and wrong in
Yeah.
situations.
I don't know if she thought that she was doing anything wrong. I mean, I don't know that. I don't know if she like understood why claiming to be a Native American might be seen as an insult to some Native Americans. I don't know if she understood that. So there's a lot of things that are unknown right now. Might be that, because one of the symptoms of schizophrenia, it can be hallucinations and auditory delusions. She just had a different idea of what reality is than that what majority of us have. Uh, and when I say majority, I mean Western Europeans. I don't mean there's a lot of different types of indigenous people that see the world much differently than Western Americans. I can't sit here and say that she's wrong either. I can't say that she was right either. I don't know the full story. I do feel that she really doesn't strike me as somebody that was doing this maliciously. And that's why it's difficult. It's a complex situation, it's a complex issue because there's just a lot of things we don't know. And we don't, I mean, the sisters, they may be telling the truth, but it might be that there was some like maybe they're troubled as well. We don't really know enough about them to understand the full complexity of the issue and whether or not what they're saying is completely accurate. It might be, it might not be. There might be so many issues in the family dynamics that we're not aware of. Maybe she was LittleFeather was the scapegoat, the black sheep of the family, and she's just very misunderstood. And she didn't feel like she had the support of her family, and so she came up with a new identity. I mean, that might be happening, might not be. I'm just throwing that out there as a theory. I don't have any facts or evidence of anything that went on for her, except for what she has stated about herself and what other people have stated about her. And identity is it's such a personal issue. It's so ingrained in who we are, where it's about belonging. It's about finding out who we are as individuals and in a group, where like what our place in the world is. And I know for like it is true that like for Black people and Native American people, a long time ago you were just decided what you were based on how dark your skin was. So like Native Americans who were light skinned were not considered Native Americans, Spanish conquistadors. So they were the ones deciding that for you. So they were passing judgment and determining what your race is based on what they were seeing. When she was at the Oscars, people were doing like the tomahawk chop as a way to make fun of her when she was walking out of the Oscars. She was booed on stage and because they didn't think it was appropriate for somebody to be talking about this at the Oscars. They're trying to speak out because they have this platform. And they're trying to get people bring awareness to the subject that they care about. And it's not like they're telling you what to do. They're just sending you giving you the message that they have. And I think that's what I know it's long-winded, but I think that's what Sacheen is trying to do when she went up to the Oscars is to tell people this is happening, and this actor who is refusing his award and boycotting the Oscars believes this. And so that's an important issue for us all to be aware of. So she did a lot of good, and I think that it shouldn't be overshadowed by whatever personal demons she had, whatever obstacle she was struggling with.
It's just one of those things where like I could see somebody who's struggling with mental health issues around reality really embraced it and then dedicated herself to helping people like you said. It was in a different time. She likely did attend with her dad, a moving thing for her. Looking back, it's like, oh man, maybe I shouldn't have done that stuff, but I didn't know anything. And I think like that's something to consider with some of these people who are considered controversial now, is that in all likelihood she didn't realize, she didn't have the same understanding of the situation probably as we would nowadays. And we have more access to other people's voices and more access to information at our fingertips now, so it's easier to be aware, and there's less excuses nowadays. She did help a lot of people, and she did do her best to become immersed in the cultures that she was claiming to be a part of. And I think that as far as cultural appropriation goes, in some ways it almost becomes like the blurring of the line of cultural appropriation and cultural appreciation. She did bring awareness, and she stood up when like some people weren't willing to stand up, and she took a lot of heat for that. She was really dedicated to the identity that she did build.
Being a human being, there's a lot of things that we have to deal with, and sometimes we get into situations that we make mistakes, and it doesn't mean that our intention was to do bad or to like to make fun of somebody or to I don't think she was making fun of Indians. I think that she really just felt, like you said, she fell in love with the cultures. She fell in love with their values. So she must have somehow in her gut knew that these things were true for her. So who are we to say that it's wrong, that she shouldn't feel like, if she feels like an Indian, she's not an Indian? Doesn't mean her feelings don't count, or how she identifies herself doesn't count, because she doesn't have a percentage of blood that says she's from Apache, White Mountain Apache or Yukon. Who are we to say that she can't have those values and beliefs? You don't go up to somebody else and say you can't feel this way because it's not been established that this is who you are. Um, it's not why are we so invested in what somebody else is identifying us with if it's not hurting anybody? She's not making fun of people. She's not like saying these things she's not exploiting anybody. She's not trying to sell Indian blankets for thousands of dollars and then pocketing the money. It's not like she was being mean and cruel and deceptive. She really did feel like she was a Native American person. And yeah, I understand why her family would be upset, because like they're probably proud of their heritage, which they should be. Yeah, that's fine. And they didn't want somebody in their family to like go against that. Because, if my family member decided they weren't, my sister decided she's not my sister because she's like has a different ethnicity, I'd be like concerned for her. But I don't think I would be, everybody's different, but I don't think I would be like shunning her and telling the whole world that she's not this way. But, everybody's different. It's not to say I'm not going to claim that I understand why they did what they did or that it's wrong. And the Cruz sisters probably felt like this was, she was lying. She was telling the whole world she was something she wasn't. And that's understandable as well, you know. I do think that a lot of times people are mistreated in the world, and their trauma dictates what they decide. And that might have been what LittleFeather was doing. She was trying to go towards values that aligned with hers because they felt right to her, but also because maybe the family she came from or the people around her, she didn't really fit in. And that was why I was thinking that maybe that had something to do with the family dynamics, because her sisters really wanted to tell the world how wrong she was for lying. So, oh, all right. And so with that, we're just going to say thank you, everybody, for watching this video all the way through the end. We do really appreciate it. We do have a kind of an announcement. So this was a limited series, the Trailblazers videos, and we have one more video that we're going to be working on. I'm going to be creating a new show on YouTube that's going to be continuing on with adversity subjects, and I believe Tamla is also going to be working on a new video new show.
Yeah, I'm gonna be doing like a smaller series too about people who have inspired me or people who are helping out in the community. So kind of like separating what we've been doing here and each of us taking like part of it, which I think is great.
Yeah. And so the reason why we're ending the series is because it does take a long time to edit these kind of videos. And we really we each have our own projects that we're doing. And it's just not, it's very difficult to keep up with it all. And we don't want to shorten the experience of these videos. We don't want to get burnt out. We want to make sure that they're high quality. We want you to enjoy them, and we want to make sure that we're giving it our all. And so we do very much are still going to work together eventually. We're still friends. This isn't an unhappy decision. Uh, we look forward to your comments, to look, to your likes, your suggestions, and your comments. We really do appreciate those because it shows us that you are watching the show and you're getting something out of it. We would also like more subscribers, so that because that helps us to when we do our new shows as well as to be able to eventually get monetized. So because we will definitely be able to continue on doing these videos. All right, and thank you guys for just sticking with us. Thank you. All right.
Thank you.
All right. Okay.